Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today as we get prepped for year-end HR and payroll. While I wish I had a magic wand or a crystal ball, I certainly don't have that. But Tracy and I are going to do a good job of just giving you some insight into 2022, what we think should be on your radar, as well as some of the year-end payroll limits and so forth that have been communicated so far. So Tracy will dig into that. But before we get started, I do want to go over a few housekeeping items with you. So today's presentation is located in the right-hand side of your screen in the handout section. So feel free to download that as you wish. Also, after today's session, this presentation is being recorded, so it will be sent out to you. That way, if you have any colleagues that couldn't make the session, you want to share it with them, go ahead, feel free to do so. We have allowed some time at the end of today's presentation for questions, so feel free to stick them in the chat section, and we'll go ahead and hopefully be able to answer them all. And if not, Tracy and I will definitely reach out to you separately and get those questions answered for you. If we see a significant number of questions, commonly asked questions, we might do an FAQ. Sometimes that's something that we do. So I hear that somebody cannot hear me. Kaylee, can you just confirm you can hear me?
I can hear you. I was just responding to her.
Okay, hang tight, Melinda. So as we move forward here, I just wanted to reiterate some of the learning objectives in our session. So we're going to create an awareness of some new HR related requirements that we thought you should be mindful of, as well as understanding new payroll requirements, and then looking at 2022. Yes, there are some opportunities, but there are also potential challenges. So throughout today's session, we will be having polling questions, 3 of them only. So we ask that you kindly participate. We will need 80% participation on those poll questions. As you know, that's the only way that we can offer those CPE credits to many of you who need them for your certifications, especially if you're narrowing down on the end of the year and those requirements. Our agenda for today is just to talk through a couple opening remarks. We're going to talk about what's going on right now in the world. We're going to try not to say that C word too often, and C, I mean COVID, or P for pandemic. We'll try not to say that too often because I think most of us are just tired of hearing it. We're going to talk about the difference between change versus transition. There's a couple things from an HR perspective that I want to dial you into and hopefully just give you some foresight into some things that are happening in the world of your employees right now. We're going to talk about a few regulatory items that are coming down the pike potentially, and some that are truly coming down the pike. We'll talk about those payroll updates and then answer any questions that you might have. So let's go ahead and get started. So right now, there's a lot going on in the world, and some of this you might be familiar with, and some of it might be new to you. So let me walk you through these. Earlier this year, a couple months ago, the National SHRM event was held, and at that event, they communicated that 1.2 million people retired early due to the pandemic. That for me was a little startling. I had heard a couple of people say, you know what, I'm just going to retire now. I don't have the energy in me to rebuild my business or to just, come back to a place where we have to wear masks and have so many requirements still as we go through this winter season as well. So I guess I'm not really surprised to see this, but it just continues to reinforce that we will continue to see in droves people retiring. And so what does that mean? Well, that's going to cause a lot of transition within your organization. And certainly, hopefully you've been planning, doing some succession planning, whether it's an owner, a leader, etc. But if not, now is the time because it's going to happen rather quickly. Most baby boomers will probably be out of the workforce in the next 10 years, which seems like a long way away, but it's really not. It's going to come really quick. So we got to do our part now to start developing that next generation of talent and getting our organizations prepared for the future. You might have already heard about the Great Resignation. So a lot of people have taken the time over the past 18 months, we won't say that word, to just really reflect on their lives. They want to, maybe do things differently, have more work-life balance, maybe redo their career, think about doing something different. So it's given a lot of people pause. And so while, I commend people for taking that moment to just think about themselves and, what are their life goals going forward, it also now puts pressure on all of us in the workforce where we might have people leaving our company, leaving the industry. So that just puts continued pressure on us from a recruiting and a retention standpoint. And we'll talk about that here in a little bit. The other thing too that we'll talk about is remote work. It's here to stay. I'm sorry to tell you, but it's here to stay for at least a small portion. And we'll talk about that further. The vaccination regulation, all of you have heard it. I'm going to touch on that a little bit. I do believe something will go into effect. I'm not sure that it will be what was originally communicated, so I'll give you more details on that as we move forward. And then institutions as we know them are changing. Now, I can't take credit for this one. This was during a conversation with our CEO, where if you think about many of the experiences that we're used to having or seeing, they're changed now. So what does that mean going forward? Is it permanent? Is it temporary? Just something for you to continue to monitor. Well, what do I mean by institutions? Well, think about education. I know when I went to proceed or pursue my PhD, people laughed at me and said, wow, that's not a real degree. You're doing it online. So now I chuckle a little bit because most of us had to some extent, shift to online learning, whether we're just taking an extra credit for a certification, whether it's our children that had to balance doing schoolwork from home. So now it has come forward, and I believe it's here to stay. Do I think all the universities, brick and mortar, will close up? No, but they won't look the same as they had in the past. But just think about some of the other institutions. Think about companies that had these beautiful big buildings. Now they're pretty much vacant or dark. And we could go on and spend probably 15 minutes just talking about the different types of institutions and the changes that have happened over the past 18 to 24 months and what that might look like going forward. The way we shop, the way we see a concert, there's many examples that we can pull from. So as you're thinking about your workforce and you're thinking forward, layer that into your thinking because it definitely does have an impact, especially if any of your clients, suppliers, vendors, customers, etc., are in the spaces that have been significantly impacted in that way. So let's go ahead and move forward here. Let's start with our first poll question. I'm curious. So I haven't told you a lot about the mandate. Many of you probably have seen it, so you have some awareness, I believe, but what impact do you think it'll have on your organization? Will it be significant? Yes, no, or are you unsure? Kaylee's going to go ahead and pull that up so you can vote. And like I said, once we get 80%, we'll go ahead and close it down and share it so all of you know then what your peers are facing as well. So I see that there's positives and negatives with the mandate. Certainly I stay neutral if I can. I won't share opinions in this session. This isn't about any political or personal opinions, but rather what are the things that we as organizations have to think about if this does truly come into effect at the turn of the new year as it's expected or supposed to. So we got 91% of you. Thank you so much. Kaylee, you want to share those results? Looks like some of you will have impact, 30%, and then 42% said no, it's not going to impact us significantly, which is good. I'm glad to hear that. 28% of you who are unsure, I'm going to give you some things to think about as we move forward here, so that way you know how it might impact you. And if you have questions after today's session, you can always pick my brain. Don't be afraid to reach out and ask us a question. Okay, Kaylee, we're going to move on now. Thank you. So let's talk about the difference between change and transition. I like to read a lot. I've read some books recently, and it just gave me a new perspective with where we are today in the world coming out of this 18-month period. And I just wanted to share that with you. And certainly, we can read books all day long, but unless we apply it, it's not going to be impactful. So I want to talk about how we apply this. But as you think about change is an event, it's transactional, it's something that happens in time. So think about when you change cell phones, right? That initially was pretty big when we first got cell phones. But now, as you think about the updates that Apple or Samsung, et cetera, do, it's not so significant, right? They do some changes with the apps, increase screen size, reduce screen size, change functionality, and we just really get used to it and kind of learn it on our own, right? But think about the first time that you saw an iPhone or the first time that you saw a smartphone, right? Or a BlackBerry. That was pretty significant. So it was a change because it was a different type of way to communicate with friends and family and in the workplace. But then it also was very significant in how we do communicate, right? Instead of just picking up the phone and talking, now we're texting, now we're doing many other things. And so the cell phone is an easy example to point to. So I'm going to do that throughout these next couple of slides. But there are so many different things that we can look at and point at when we're thinking about change and transition. So when you think about change, incremental is small bite-sized pieces. So that's that tiny little update they push through on my phone in the evening, right, when I'm sleeping. But if they were to do away with the cell phone as we know it today and invent something drastic, that might be more transformational. So for some of us going through the past 18 months, there was transformational change as we started working from home. And so I was lucky. I had started that journey earlier, so I was prepared pretty well, and so was Stan Boness. But there were many companies who were not positioned to just turn on a switch and allow employees to work from home. So those are the differences between incremental and transformational. Transformational is significant and it a lot of times causes a big disruption. So now you're probably wondering, why are you telling me this? Well, because it has a huge impact on your workforce of what they've lived and breathed over the past, 18 months and so forth. So as you think about change, it is situational. So change is working from home now instead of the office, and we could pull many different examples. But transition, on the other hand, is psychological. So while we wish we were done, we're not. It's going to continue into 2022. So with transition, these are the books that I just wanted to highlight for you. So that way, if you want to read it further, you can. Certainly, I believe they're really good reads and worth investing in. And I bet we'll read this now and we'll read it in 5 years and probably have a different lens that we're looking at transition and change. But let's go ahead and just spend a few moments here on transitions itself. So our employees right now, they're trying to let go of the way that the things were in the past, right? If it's not broke, don't fix it, is some of the mindsets that our employees have right now, right? Well, some of the way that things used to be, we're not going back there. We're not going to go back to where everybody is working in the office anymore. It's just not going to happen. There are some companies that have done that. Whether it's sustainable, I'm not sure. Do I think we'll stay 100% remote? No. People still like to be together, even though sometimes they grumble about each other. They want to be in person and see each other. There's a good feeling about that. But there are things that we have to sunset, things that we have to let go of, and it's kind of like a grieving process in a way. You have to be able to move forward. So where I think we are right now is in this neutral zone. We're kind of stuck. We're trying to figure out, okay, what does the future say going forward, and what do we need to be thinking about and doing, this great resignation, the vaccine mandate, and so forth. So it's a time of repositioning. We're getting ready because the next step is that new beginning next year. So we settle into new policies, new ways of doing things, coming out of, hopefully what would be the final season of the pandemic, restricting a lot of what we do. We just need to be mindful and thinking forward, okay, what does that mean for our employees? What are they going to be looking for, the ones that we have? What about the ones that we're recruiting? What are they looking for? Because if it is truly psychological and it truly is emotional, there are feelings and behaviors all wrapped into that. And you can see many examples of things up here on the screen. But that's what you should be thinking about how you're best going to appeal to your workforce and keep them, because it's really, I shouldn't say really, but it's a lot easier to retain your employees than to try to find new ones. So that should be your focus. That should be one thing that you take away from today is that, look, change is inevitable. It's going to continue to happen. We're going to see both incremental and disruptive change, transformative change going forward. But what can we do to help employees transition through such a difficult period of time? And if we don't have the resources internally, are there strategic partners out there that could help us and help our employees so we do get to a better place, that we see positive turnaround after the first of the year, and that way we can really, have some successful times going forward, not only in 2022, but beyond. So I'm going to shift over to our next poll question now. So, will you be offering a hybrid work arrangement permanently? So I will speak to this in a little bit. I don't want to give it away and influence your decisions, but if you could select one of those answers, I would greatly appreciate it. We're getting close to 80%, so keep clicking away. We'll go ahead and share these out for everybody to see. All right, we're there. Kaylee, you want to shut it down? 40% say yes, you're going to. And I think that's great. I think that's where you need to be because when we're interviewing candidates, what they're saying is we want hybrid. Doesn't have to be full-time remote, but hybrid, 3 days in the office, 2 work from home. So for those that are participating that say, no, you can't offer, well, maybe there's a reason. Certainly restaurant work, you can't offer remotely. And there's other industries, medical, etc., where you can't. So, as an organization that might not be able to offer that hybrid work arrangement, what else can you offer instead to still be an exciting place to work and having people excited to be in person? And that's where I think focusing on the purpose. Why do you do what you do? That's going to help you drive loyalty with your employees. When they rally around that, they're going to stay with you for a long time. So purpose, why are we doing what we're doing? And the culture that you provide is critically important going forward. And then for those that are unsure, it's okay. You don't have to decide today, but just continue to watch your industry and watch the behaviors of those who you're interviewing, interacting with, and recruiting, because they'll probably influence your decision a little bit, one way or the other. I'm not saying one's right or wrong, but I do see a movement of people requesting it, employees demanding it when they are interviewing. So that has forced some people, some companies, to think differently about their ability to offer that going forward, either temporarily or permanently. Thank you, Kaylee. If you want to go ahead and take that down, we'll go ahead and keep moving forward here. So a little bit about remote work. It is here to stay, I'm sorry to say, but I do think hybrid is key. I think so long as you can offer hybrid, having employees have the ability to plug in person, and whether that's coming into the office every week or once a month, you cluster together. So if you have employees scattered in multiple states, how can you bring them together to really create that in-person feel or that gathering feel, that connectedness? Because at the end of the day, people still enjoy being with others. There's this camaraderie and this collaboration that occurs when you're in person. So give thought to that. I did share a little bit just some of the recruiting challenges that we faced when we're trying to help clients find employees, is that years ago, it used to just be, well, what are the benefits? What's the compensation? And what's the culture like? Now, one of the first questions that we're hearing is, do they offer hybrid work? And so we haven't seen that before. And now it's being, put at the forefront of the conversation. And we even have candidates who are saying, well, if I got to go into the office, I'm not gonna, be interested in continuing that conversation. So just want to share that knowledge with you and information. Hopefully it's useful and you can think about that in your organization. How are you going to respond when you get that question? From a retention standpoint, the hybrid work arrangement has offered flexibility, has given us the ability to balance some of those things that previously were harder to balance, whether it's doctor's appointments, sporting events, and things like that. So there is a positive to the hybrid work arrangement. And I really hope that you can, to some extent, offer that at least sometimes, if not all the time, to your employees, because they really have a peace of mind with that, knowing they're not going to get in trouble or written up if they have to miss work and so forth. So I really do hope from a retention standpoint, you can figure out how to balance it within your company and your industry, because it is something that employees would like. They like the ability to make their own decision to the extent that they can, and then that gives them the ability to feel empowered to be able to give back to your organizations and, um, really feel connected and engaged. It's not always about pizza parties. But I do want to caution you. So, from a policy development or policy standpoint, if you don't have a policy in place, put one in place. At least put guide rails. If you don't want to call it policy, that's okay. But do communicate what the expectation is. Are there core hours that you expect people to work? Is there a certain way that they have to present themselves on Teams or on GoToWebinar like this? Are there certain backgrounds or types of clothing that are appropriate or not? And so you want to set those expectations. And I hate to do this, but think through the worst case scenario. Think of a remote work possibility that goes wrong. And what do you need to put into your guidelines to make sure that that doesn't happen? Or if it does, then you have the ability to actually rein in employees, shift their behavior. You might have to write them up, hopefully not. But it extends beyond employee behavior, but also the use of technology. So what's appropriate, what's not? Do employees have to provide anything on their own? An at-home office arrangement. I know that there are some states who look like they're moving forward with requiring companies actually provide a stipend to employees. So I think that's something in 2022 we need to continue to be mindful of. If that gains traction or if it's just going to stay with only a couple states, I don't think anything will happen at the federal standpoint. So just continue to watch the states that you're in going forward to see if they have any requirements as to helping to supplement some of the additional costs that employees have for working at home. And then how do you handle that? Is it through an allowance, an expense reimbursement, and so forth? So there's a lot of different paths that can go down, and we don't have enough time to really dig in deeper on that, but it is something you should consider, is what type of policy guide rails do you need in place so it doesn't distract from the employee work experience or the productivity of those individuals. That ultimately is the sweet spot that you want to be, where employees have some of that flexibility, they're feeling good that they have options, but they also aren't just running loose in their own silo and potentially doing something that could be negative to the company, from a cybersecurity or just a branding image perspective, etc. So if you have questions as you're looking to build your policy, or if you would like a sample policy, please let us know. We'd be happy to talk with you about that, because there are several different factors that have to be woven in, and it's not just cookie cutter. So. All right, so as I mentioned, the states do have varying policies all the time. We see it, right? If only they could just get together on the same page, it would make all of our worlds a little bit easier. We've seen this over the past 18 months. So I'm not sure if you had a chance to participate in any of the webinars that Karen Poist or Kim Tarnikow have done, but they've done a really nice job of outlining some of the things that you can expect if you are now going to have employees in other states. So we won't dig in too deep here, but what I will tell you is that each state is different. So some states like Virginia, you put your toe in the state, you now have an obligation from an employee withholding and unemployment perspective. Other states have a little bit more of a grace period. So it really is about knowing the states that you are located in and what are your obligations as an employer. So right now, employees would love to be able to just pick wherever they work. And, ideally, why shouldn't they be able to just work wherever they want? They go down to the beach for a weekend, or they go down to the beach for a month. Why shouldn't they be able to just plug in with their technology if they're in a role where they could do it? If it's an engineer or architect or somebody who can work remotely, sounds pretty cool, right? Well, in some cases that now creates an obligation for you. And the last thing I want for all of you is to find out 2-3 weeks after the fact, a month after the fact, that, hey, your employee was working in Hawaii or they were working in Texas. And you're like, wait a minute, we're not registered. Because then what happens is when employees are creating a physical presence within a state, now there might be other obligations from a sales tax or business income tax perspective. So you really should go out to our website and take a look at those webinars if you haven't already. And certainly if you want us to take a deep dive by looking at your employee roster, the projects that you might have, the customers that you're serving in the various states, we'd be happy to take a look and give you some guidance as to where your risk levels might be, some of the vulnerable spots you might be in, and what you can do to right size that. Last thing you want is the state to knock on your door and give you a bunch of penalties and interest just because you haven't done the appropriate registrations and so forth. So being on the front side is better. There are always, additional work that has to be done, and then there could be additional fees and so forth to be on the right side and proactive. So you really have to weigh the pros and cons of being in a state, allowing employees to be in a state, and whether or not it makes sense. Karen was talking to somebody recently who decided not to hire somebody just because of the state that they were in, because of the additional work that was needed on the company's part and the additional obligations. So just wanted to share that with you. It is something to keep on your radar. With technology, the states are getting smarter, they're talking to each other, and it's only a matter of time before they figure out what's going on and where you've been and what you're doing. So not trying to scare you, but it is something you need to monitor as you head into 2022, as you think about the hybrid work arrangement, allowing employees to pick and choose where they want to work, what policies you might have to have in place to kind of control where they go, or at least control the communication that happens if they do step into another state. So just want you to be mindful of that. So I have one more slide here before I'm getting ready to hand it over to Tracy. A couple regulatory updates. Many of you probably already heard this, and if not, I wanted to point it out. Employee retention tax credit, that did sunset September 30th. Initially, we thought it would go through to the end of the year here, but in the infrastructure package, they did pull that back. So that is no longer applicable here in Q4. However, if you have not taken advantage of this and you want to explore it, we can still go back and do amended returns, calculations, and so forth into 2020 and 2021. So reach out if this is something you haven't explored and want to see if possibly you could benefit, because companies are benefiting millions of dollars from this. COVID-related paid sick leave also sunsetted here September 30th of 2021. That was for any paychecks that occurred in Q3. So that does not continue to apply. I initially thought they might extend it, but they didn't. And I don't even hear of anything heading into 2022. So that is officially done. I do know that some companies have continued to pay sick time, but you just don't get that offsetting payroll tax credit any longer. So completely your choice, optional, but it did sunset. Vaccination mandate. Where we are right now is that the legislation was introduced. OSHA has been assigned to govern this, but there is a lot of resistance at the federal level. So there were lawsuits filed by over 10 states. And so the Federal Appeals Court also put a stay on it. So right now we're kind of holding in limbo. Hopefully here in the next week or two, we will find out what that final rule will be or won't be. But if it goes through as is, as of January 4th, if you have 100 employees or more, 100 as the point in time when that legislation was introduced, you will have an obligation to require all of your employees be vaccinated or get weekly testing. So there's going to be a lot of administrative burden put onto companies if this truly goes into effect. Some of you still don't have a choice if you're doing federal contracts. I don't know that that will be repealed. I haven't heard that. I do know there was pressure being put to not make it as restrictive, but time will tell. So at this point in time, you have to think through administratively, how are we going to handle tracking the status of our employees, and being able to respond to an outside agency if they knock on our door and want to audit us. We have to set our personal opinions aside. But I will tell you, for companies with less than 100 employees who are not required to make vaccines mandated, you might now have a talent pool open up to you, some additional people that you could pick from, because those who firmly believe in not getting the mandate and do not want to get the testing, they might be looking to leave the company that they're with that has over 100 employees. So it could put you in a little bit of a different position from a recruiting standpoint. Now, for companies over 100, the good news for you is that there are a lot of people who said, look, if you as a company are not going to require people get the vaccine, I don't want to work for you either. So now they might be jumping over to the 100 or more where they know that it would be a requirement. Now, what it seems right now is that if you work remotely, you would not have to adhere to this requirement. So again, there's still a lot that has to be sorted out, and we will stay at the forefront of it. We will communicate accordingly how it impacts you and your organization. But this is something that could come rather quickly here over the next couple weeks, and it would have to be in effect by January 4th unless they push out that deadline. So stay tuned. With that, we will continue to keep you informed the best that we can, although we just don't have that magic wand that we could give you the exact answer of how this is going to play out. One last note that I want to make that I think potentially will happen in the future. I think through the past 18 months, it's really set the stage for this to be moved down the path. But I believe, just like some states have already done, like Arizona or Montgomery County in Maryland, they have already put rules in place that companies have to provide paid sick leave. So I think the federal government might lean in here and might make a requirement. Now, before you all freak out and panic, don't worry. I don't know that you'll have to add to what you already have, so long as you have a generous PTO policy or paid sick leave policy already. You might already be in a good place to comply. But that is something I'd keep a watch out for, and we'll definitely share more information if it becomes available. But that's a gut feeling I have, that in 2022, at some point, we might see where the federal government tries to put in place a requirement for paid sick leave. So I am going to handle our last poll question here. So are you confident that you're treating exempt versus non-exempt employees correctly? And the reason I'm throwing this in here, so if Kaylee, you'll go ahead and get that teed up for us, people can start voting. Because at the end of the year, inevitably, we talk about this a lot when we give payroll updates and we're meeting with clients, because we have people who don't either understand the difference between the two, or maybe for the first time have one or the other and just not quite sure. Maybe have an employee who has selected to change their status. So this is a critical one because it affects the overtime rules and it impacts what you pay employees if they work over 40 hours. And this is where companies can get in hot water if you don't have your arms wrapped around it. So I see that we do have a couple of people who are not confident or just not quite sure. Feel free to reach out to us separately. We would be happy to help you quickly identify if you are in a good place here. So generally, you want to follow what the Department of Labor, Fair Labor Standards Act has outlined as the difference between an exempt versus non-exempt. And so if you have a receptionist, that person generally would not qualify as an exempt, somebody who you wouldn't have to pay overtime. Those with professional degrees and maybe supervisory responsibilities, etc. There's a couple key other ways in which they could qualify. But again, it all comes back to your job description and making sure it's well defined. That way it's clear to any auditor who would come in if you are treating someone appropriately or not. And we'd be happy to help you ferret that out. Make sure you're in a good place. Generally, people aren't knocking on the door just asking this question. They will ask it if they come in for a specific reason. They'll poke in this way as well. Or if you have a disgruntled employee who calls and says, hey, I wasn't paid overtime and I should have been, maybe they just don't have enough knowledge to make that statement and you are really doing what you're supposed to. But we want to make sure that you are in a good place to respond to somebody of an outside agency should you get questioned as to how you're paying your people and why you're paying them that way. So Tracy, I am going to hand it over to you for our payroll tax updates. We have some really good information that she's been able to pull together. However, it all hasn't been finalized, but I'm going to let Tracy take over. Tracy, it's all yours.
Okay, thank you so much, Christy. Hello, everyone. I am happy that you're able to join us today. And I know that everyone is excitingly awaiting the annual payroll tax updates for 2022, a busy time of year for us people that process payroll. Again, my name is Tracy Bua, and I will be discussing all these updates that are currently available to us. The IRS publication, or 15B, Employee Tax Guide to Fringe Benefits, is not officially released as of today. Therefore, we don't have all the new 2022 deduction limits, but I was able to pull a lot of information that I can share with you. So let's begin. I wanted to start off with COLA adjustments for 2022 that just came out. It was actually just on the news the other night. It's been on the news for the last couple days because it's historic. It's actually 5.9%. It's the largest increase to Social Security benefits since 1983. This is really an indication of rising inflation costs, and it's reflective in some of the contribution limits for 2022 that I'm going to share with you to follow. But many of the limits aren't really increases so much as just increasing the amounts to incorporate this COLA increase. So I just wanted to throw that out before we begin. So next slide, Christy. Here are the Social Security limits for 2022. We had a 2.94% increase to the limit of 2021, and it brings it from 142,800 in 2021 to 147,000 in 2022. No other changes really occurred to Social Security or Medicare in 2022, and the additional Medicare tax for wages over 200,000 remains the same. You will still have to take the 0.9% of the wages over 200,000 when processing. Nothing like that has changed. And I just also wants to note all the slides that are coming up. I have little arrows at the bottom of the screen that you can click into if you have any further questions or need more information. All these are provided for you for each of the slide topics. So next slide. Okay. Here, as for the retirement plan limits in 2022, for your 401k, your 403b, your 457 employee contribution limits, they have increased. They're up $1,000 from the $19,500 in 2021. They are now the $20,500 in 2022. But even with all the COLA adjustments, the 401k catch-up contribution for individuals ages 50 and higher remains the same. They are still what they were in 2021 of $6,500. Highly compensated employee thresholds have increased. They were 130,000 in 2021, and they are up to 135,000 in 2022. Simple 401k and simple IRS contribution limits have also increased from the 13,500 in 2021. They are now 14,000 in 2022. But again, the simple catch-up contribution for age 15 and plus individuals, there is no change. It is still 3,000 from what it was in 2021 of 3,000. Same with the traditional and Roth IRA contribution limits. There's no change. It is still 6,000. Again, traditional and Roth IRA catch-up contributions for individuals age 50 or higher, they have not changed either. They are still the $7,000 from 2021. So these are all the retirement plan limit changes from 21 into 2022. Okay. As for HSA and FSA limits, your FSA contribution limits did change slightly. They were $2,750 in 2021. They're $2,850 in 2022. For the HSA contribution limits for an individual coverage, they did increase slightly. They were $3,600 in 2021, and they are $3,650 in 2022. HSA contributions for family coverages, which is always double that of the individual, are now $7,300 compared to the $7,200 in 2021. Catch-up contributions, there's a theme going here. HSA catch-up contributions for people age 55 and older, it remains unchanged. It has not changed from the 2021, it is still at $1,000. Maximum annual out-of-pocket for HDHP for individual coverage did go up slightly. It was $7,000 in 2021. It is $7,050 in 2022. And same with the maximum annual out-of-pocket for HDHP for family coverage. That did slightly increase, $14,000 in 2021 and $14,100 in 2022. Next slide, please. There we go. There are some new items that are on the draft form of the 2022 IRS Publication B. The official publication should be released sometime in December by the IRS. We're not sure when, but the draft did have 3 points that are changing in 2022, and Christy did mention 2 of these changes. The COVID-19 related credit for qualified sick and family leave wages, it's limited to leave taken after March 31st of 2020 and before October 1st of 2021. That is expired. Employers that paid qualified wages or will pay in 2022 for leave taken after March 31st of 2020 and before October 1st of 2021 are eligible to claim a credit in 2022. Also, the COVID-related employee retention credit is expiring. The employee retention credit was limited to qualified wages paid after March 12th of 2020 and before October 1st of 2021. There's also a credit for COBRA premium assistant payments, which is limited between April 1st of 2021 through September 30th of 2021. And I do have at the bottom a link to the draft that has additional information on each of these new items in the publication 15B for 2022. So I wanted to discuss the FUTA credit reduction a bit here because COVID has really affected this area of payroll. COVID has increased the jobless rate in 45 of the 50 states in 2020. And the result is in many states, they needed to apply for the FUTA unemployment loans. And this is really important for employers to have on their radar because these federal loans, if they're not repaid by 2022, these states could become FUTA credit retention states. And I know in the past, the list of states were very small. It was usually California and US Virgin Islands. But as you can see here, the states are the large ones in this country. And these states could be FUTA credit retention states. And if your state is on that list, you as the employer would begin paying another $21 per employee in FUTA tax wages annually. And I know this isn't a big deal for smaller employees with only a couple employees, but it will really add up for companies that have large number of employees. So I just wanted to put this out on your radar that this is something that you should be watching and see if your state is going on this list as a FUTA credit retention state. So just wanted to throw that one out for you. Here are the minimum wages changes in 2022 by state. These are very fluid right now. These amounts are being updated daily. This is as of, I went out on Friday, November 12th, so this is the most current as of the 12th. And I provided the link down below for you to review what your state wages are in 2022 to ensure that you are meeting the minimal wage thresholds. And I also wanted to also note that Pennsylvania remained the same. They are unchanged at $7.25. But just go out and make sure that your state's minimum wages haven't changed going into 2022. And just a note, I know there are some states like New Jersey, for example, your minimum wage can be mid-year. It's not always on a calendar year. I wanted to make note of that. Some states are starting January 1st, but some states are mid-year. So you have to also be aware of when your minimum wages changes within your states. So next slide, please. Okay, here's the current states with changes to their state unemployment taxable wage bases for 2022. Again, Pennsylvania's taxable wage limit will remain at $10,000. And many of the states, I actually have been going out there and looking at over the last couple of weeks, and they're trickling in, but many of the states haven't released what their wage limits are as of November 12th for 2022. So again, this is a good source to go out and properly assess what your state unemployment wage limit is. So when you start processing your quarterly returns for first quarter, you have the correct wage limits for what your state is. Effective on October 1st of 2021, the IRS released this new high-low per diem rate for business travel within the continental US. This may be used instead of the General Service Administration's actual per diem rate for business travel, for lodging and meals and incidental expenses. And it appears to be an easier method to process the per diem rates. The N-2021-52 link I have here does provide more details if you're interested in this and how to proceed with using this new high-low per diem rate if you need that additional information. So, and since we are moving into the time of year of W-2s and 1099s for year-end processing, I just wanted to do a quick reminder here of classification differences between what an employee is and what an independent contractor is to really ensure that you're classifying your workers correctly. And this really will avoid costly failure to issue penalties and anything if you are audited by the Department of Labor. So let's first discuss employees and what they are. For an employee, the company has the right to control when, where, how, and what the employee performs for their job. Companies can assign additional projects to the employee, and they really control the sequence of work for that employee. The company furnishes tools and materials and equipment to that employee. The company has behavioral controls, which includes detailed instructions and training, and that's all provided by the company for the employee. And typically employees work exclusively for the employer. And there's a continuous relationship between the worker and the company when it is an employee. And very importantly, employees are paid by salary rather than a agreed cost of performing a particular job. In contrast, independent contractors set their own hours, determine their own sequence of work, and work by the job. So independent contractors furnish their own tools and material and equipment, and they can work for multiple companies. ICs determine when the work is performed, and it's really free from direction and control by the hiring company in their performance of service. Independent contractors get paid by the job and have significant financial investment in that job. And this really shows a financial control, which is whether the worker has the opportunity to make a profit or suffer a loss. So this is a really defining point of what an independent contractor is. And an important note here that I really try to stress is independent contractors should provide your company with detailed invoices, and you as the company should only pay that independent contractor from the invoice only. You don't pay independent contractors from timesheets or on payroll. A clear divide between how you pay your employees and how you pay your independent contractor must exist. This is very important. If you need or have any questions regarding this matter, or you need any additional information, I know Stample Ness has discussed this topic of 1099 classifications between employees and independent contractors in the past. We've had full seminars on year-end payroll webinars about this in detail, and you can find it on our site if you want to dive further into this topic. But I just wanted to quickly through and discuss since we are coming to that time of year. I'd like to end the 2022 tax update with some new reporting requirements for the 2021 W-2 regarding COVID-19 leave wages. I know Christy said we didn't want to mention the C word very much, but anybody that processes payroll knows COVID has really rocked the world of payroll the last 2 years. So again, there are some regulations regarding COVID. Employers are required to report qualified leave wages on either box 14 of the Form W-2 or on a separate statement accompanying the W-2 form for employees with qualified leave wages. And there are 2 sets of time limits for each of the 3 different types of leave payments in 2021. So theoretically, you could have up to 6 different entries regarding COVID pay on your W-2 for 2021. So it can get very confusing. So the next slide. Here is some IRS guidance provided language for each of the qualified leave wages that must be reported on your W-2s for 2021. So there's 2 time periods for each of the 3 types of leave. So the 2 time periods are after December 31st of 2020 and before April 1st of 2021, or after March 31st of 2021 and before October 1st of 2021. And the 3 types of qualified leave wages are sick leave for employees, and that's if your employee required care due to COVID. Sick leave for family, and that's if your employee provided care for another in their family. And emergency family leave wages. And this includes time for employees if they were seeking or waiting for a result of a COVID test, getting COVID shot, or recovering from an illness or condition related to the COVID shot. I researched, when I started diving into this, I researched wordage that should go in box 14 of the W-2 and what it should be if these wages were used, and found actually, honestly, very little guidance from the IRS. I think it's because box 14 is informational in nature. So the IRS didn't really give examples of what should go in box 14. But I like to have references, and as a reference, I looked at QuickBooks in 2020, and when they produced their W-2s that had qualified COVID sick leave, they labeled the box 14 as paid sick leave, or LVE, in box 14. QuickBooks right now, it's not available. If that's going to change with the 2021 W-2s, but I just wanted to provide you an example of what I've seen in box 14 for using this mandated reporting for COVID sick leave. So in conclusion, looking over the past year, COVID really has made 2021 an exciting year in payroll, to say the least. It may continue to keep us on our toes going into 2022. And it's going to be very important to maneuver around any federal regulations if they arise surrounding COVID and payroll, and to be really careful and implement them accordingly to make sure that we remain compliant and to make sure that you're processing your payroll correctly. And I just wanted to note that some of these changes stuff can be confusing. And if you ever have any questions regarding payroll, please reach out to the SN payroll team and we can assist you with any issues that you have. That's really what I just wanted to note. Use us as a source of knowledge if you do have anything that comes up that you're unsure of. So that's all I really have regarding the 2022 payroll taxes, but I just wanted to throw out that I hope everyone really has a wonderful holiday season and time to recharge our payroll batteries before January is here. So I just wanted to thank you very much for your time, and I'd like to throw it back to Christy. Thanks.
Thank you, Tracy. Great job. And hopefully everybody was able to take a couple gold nuggets away. We have a couple questions in here, so I'm going to read through them. And if we run out of time, like I said, Tracy and I'll reach out one-on-one. So we absolutely will have a complimentary 15-minute conversation with all of you if interested, to peel back. You know, are you paying exempt people correctly or non-exempt? Do you have your system set up properly for some of these new updates and so forth? So don't be afraid to reach out with the question. We'd be happy to talk with you. And then if it makes sense where we need to dig in and do some work with you, we'll talk about what fee might be appropriate at that time. Some of you are wondering if you can go back and claim COVID sick pay if you did not initially, and yes, absolutely. You would have to file a 941X form. Tracy and I both have plenty of experience with that, so we'd be able to either guide you or we could assist you in making that happen. So yes, if you haven't captured it on your original 941, we absolutely can go back and capture that. Even if you do have a payroll provider who filed the original 941, sometimes it's difficult to go through them to do the 941X, so we'd be happy to handle that for you. I did want to mention when Tracy was just talking about all of these limits, if you are with a payroll provider like ADP, Paychex, Paylocity, more than likely they are updating their system for you with these limits. You want to double check just to make sure that they do have things set up for your unique situation. It's when you might do your payroll in-house. So if you're doing it on QuickBooks or a Deltek product or any other platform, that's where you might have to manually make those edits, and you want to do it after the final pay date here in 2021 before you process your first payroll in 2022. So again, if you need help, unsure of how to make those tweaks and changes, Tracy is an expert and would be happy to help you. I might be able to fumble through a little bit and help you, but we would definitely get you the help that you need. All right, we have 1 minute left here. You will receive a survey after this. Tell us how we did. We have another webinar coming up here before the end of the year on HR matters. So if there's something specific that you want to hear more about or that we didn't cover today that you'd like to hear about, please let us know. Share that feedback. As we're in the process of developing those slides, we want to be able to bring to you the information that is most relevant. We try to expect what we think would be important to all of you, but certainly if there's something top of mind, please let us know that. So I want to thank all of you for participating today. I can't get through all of these questions. I want to be respectful of your time. So we will reach out after this and get in touch with you with answers to your questions. So thank you so much. Tracy, any final words?
Nope, that's everything.
All right. Have a great day, everyone. Thank you again for joining us. We appreciate you spending your time with us. Take care.